So this morning, I want to talk about faith and doubt. And some of you have this all figured out and have absolutely no doubts. For that, you guys can take a nap for the next 20 minutes. The rest of us got a few things that we want to figure out, okay? What I want to do is talk about this issue of doubt and faith and being certain of our faith and do it through the lens of Thomas, this story we just heard from Jerry. And it is a fascinating story, and he's a fascinating guy, and I think he gets a bad rap because the word you always hear is doubting Thomas. And for reasons we're going to talk about, I don't think that's right. You see, Thomas pops up twice in the Gospel of John. He's name-checked a few other times as they have the list of disciples and, list everybody, and it says, and then there was Thomas, also known as the twin. But really, he's there twice. And the first time is in the story about Lazarus. And what's happened in that story is Jesus and the disciples are up north, and the Pharisees are down south. And the Pharisees want to kill Jesus. And if they're going to kill Jesus, they're probably going to kill all the disciples too. And Lazarus and his family are in the south. And Lazarus is very sick, and they send word up to Jesus in the north and say, "Come quick, Lazarus is dying." And so they have this discussion about, do we go? Do we not go? If we go, they're going to kill us all. And Jesus says, we're going to go. And Thomas says, okay, if you're going, I'm going, and if you die, I die. And I love that sense of certainty with Thomas. He's not the guy that you think of as doubting Thomas in that story. But then it picks up again with this story that Jerry just read for us. And let me back up a little bit just to make sure we've all got the context. So on Friday, they crucify Jesus. They nail him to a tree. And they lay him in a tomb. And then on Sunday morning, Mary Magdalene goes to the tomb, finds the stone rolled away. So she goes and gets Peter and John. And Peter and John come and look at the tomb, and they don't see a body there. They just see the grave clothes where Jesus had been. And there's this great line in there. They believed, but they didn't understand. Hang on to that line. We'll come back to that. And so they go back to where all the other disciples are, and they can't make heads or tails out of that. And on Sunday night, they're all in this locked room, hiding out from the Jewish leaders. And Jesus appears through locked doors. And everybody's there except for Thomas. We don't know where he is that night. And so when the other disciples tell Thomas, hey, we saw Jesus, Thomas is like, no. He's like, until I put my hands in the nail holes, I ain't believing. Now, I don't think of him as having a bad faith. I think of him as being a normal human being. I mean, if you tell me that somebody I saw die in a horrible fashion was then out walking around and walking through walls, I'd be like, yeah, no. I ain't buying it. I ain't buying it until I see it with my own two eyes. And I love that. And I love the honesty there. Because it's so often you feel like you're just supposed to paper over stuff. You're just supposed to say, oh, no, I don't. It's all good. It's all fine. But Thomas is being honest with what's going on. And so that's at Sunday. And then the following Sunday, all the disciples are gathered again. And Jesus again appears to them. And this time Thomas is there. And Thomas says to Jesus, hey, you want to see? And Thomas instead makes this beautiful confession of faith. My Lord and my God. That is the strongest confession that we have in the New Testament. See, in that culture, everybody would say Lord, because Lord was anybody who could boss you around. You would say to the government officials, you would say to the plantation owner, you would say to anybody like that, my Lord, because they could tell you what to do. But to say, my God, Thomas is recognizing that Jesus is both fully human and fully divine, recognizing that Jesus is not just another human being. And it's a beautiful thing. So let's use this lens of Thomas to examine our own lives. Because so often we get told this thing, and I joke sometimes about the Christian industrial complex with all the movies and the TV shows and the inspirational books and everything else, that it feels like you're never supposed to have any doubts. That you're always supposed to just be able to say, everything is great, it's all a blessing, it's all according to God's plan, and you're never able to say, God, what am I supposed to do with this? Or say, God, I'm really having trouble understanding this. Which is, again, why I love that line from Peter and John at the tomb where it says they believed, but they didn't understand. Because how many of us have been in that spot where we don't understand what's going on? This is where a lot of us live. But the neat thing is, the Bible lets us grapple with this. See, the Bible is two things. It's instructive. There are passages of the Bible that talk us about how we're supposed to live. When you read a lot of the New Testament, Corinthians, Romans, Galatians, all that stuff, it's about this is how you're supposed to live as a Christian. But it's also descriptive of this is how people have grappled with faith. This is how people have struggled, have lived, have died. And there's one of my favorite passages in Mark chapter 9 where this guy comes to Jesus and he says, look, my son is dying. I need your help. And Jesus says, if you believe, anything is possible. And the guy says, I believe. Help my unbelief. Let me just say that again. I believe. Help my unbelief. Because he's recognizing two things in that. He's recognizing up here, I want to believe. I'm trying to rely on. He's taken steps in faith. He's coming to Jesus. But he's also recognizing in his heart, it's hard. It's hard to do that. Haven't we all been there? Been in that spot? Let me tell you a story. Back when I was in college, I had a job as a stagehand. I worked at this place called this concert hall in our college campus. And it was a great job. I really loved it. Got to see a lot of interesting things, do a lot of interesting work, worked with some great people. Loved it. A lot of fun. One part of the job I really did not care for. You see, I have this thing. I don't really like heights. And if you spent any time working in a concert hall or a theater, you know pretty much you're going to be dealing with heights on a regular basis. And we had a series of 5 catwalks up there. And you had to be up on them on a regular basis. And I remember one in particular, Catwalk 3, which was the one over the orchestra pit. So you had an extra 10, 12 feet to fall. And it was the one that you had to kind of put one leg over the railing to reach things. And so you'd kind of clamp your legs around the railing and you'd work on these instruments and you'd be looking down. And yeah, I'd hit my target heart rate pretty fast. Do not like heights. And I knew intellectually up here I was okay. But in here, as I'm looking down and thinking, how many bones am I going to break if I fall? I was not okay. And this is how a lot of us are. We struggle between these two things. Up here, we know Jesus saves us. We know Jesus died on the cross for us. But here, we're like, is it really going to be okay? Is it really going to be all right? But here's the other thing. When I was working there at the concert hall, there was people there who had been doing that for a couple of years, and a few people who had been doing it for longer. And they would just scamper through those catwalks. And it wasn't because they had any fear of it. It was because they knew it so well. And they had been doing it for so long. Those habits had built up. And they were fine with it. Not that they didn't disregard the issue. It's not that they didn't know the height. But they understood everything. Let me give you a different example. Let me think about it this way. How many of you guys, raise your hand if you drive a stick shift? Is there anybody? Okay, more than I expected. Good. I drive a stick shift. Long story, we just do, okay? Both of our cars are stick shifts. I've gotten to the point now, after driving all these years, that it's second nature to me. When I first started out, it was not. I still remember being 16 years old and learning how to drive a stick shift. And the rule with my father's car, when I was learning, was you stall it 3 times and then we go home. Not thinking back on it, it's a good rule, because at that point you're just snake bit. It's like, I can't do this anymore. I got to go home, take a break. Okay. Stall it 3 times and you go home. And I still remember. And those of you who know how to drive a stick understand the terror as you're sitting at a stoplight, pointing up the hill, and there's somebody right at your rear bumper. And I can still remember doing that thing where you got the foot across the brake and the clutch. Trying to see a few of you nod. Yeah, exactly. Those of you who've never driven a stick, trust me, it's terrifying. But now it's like, yeah, this is easy. I do this all the time. And that's the same thing with faith, is the more we practice, the more natural it becomes. The more we see how God works, the more we understand it. Let's go back to the Bible. One of my favorite passages, Hebrews chapter 11, sometimes referred to as the Faith Hall of Fame. And it talks about the stories of the people of faith. It talks about Noah and Abraham and Judges and everybody else. And it's this beautiful passage. Love it. And in that passage, it talks about what a great guy Abraham is. And how by faith God called him out of Ur. By faith he did these things. By faith he settled in the promised land. And that's the refrain, by faith. But you go back and you read Genesis, and you're like, wow, this guy is messed up. And Abraham was one of those classic 1 step forward, 2 step back, 2 steps forward, 1 step back sort of guys. God calls him out of Ur. God calls him out of this place into the promised land. He's like, okay, I'll do that. And he gets to the promised land, and he's like, you know what? Why don't we keep going down to Egypt? Let's just check that out. Okay? That's the kind of stuff he does. But over the course of decades, you see him evolve. You see him grow in faith. You see him learn to love God and trust God more. And it's one of those things where as he goes on, you see him mature in faith. That's a beautiful thing. And it's an inspiration for all of us. You see, there's this beautiful thing about being here in church together. There's a reason we come together for church, to support each other, to love each other, to understand how God calls us and works in our life. And when we do that, we encourage. And one of the reasons that we do the creed every Sunday, the Apostles' Creed or the Nicene Creed, which is a statement of our faith, is to remind ourselves of the facts, that these are the things that we believe, and these are the things that Christians have believed for millennia. You see, we don't exist at this one particular place at a time. We don't say, this is here in 2022. We exist knowing that Christians have come before us for generations, and that we have given ourselves over to God. And that through good times and bad times, through great days and bad days, Christians have followed who God is. And that is something we remind ourselves in that. And I want to encourage you sometime as we're saying the creed here, that statement, I believe in God the Father Almighty, creator of heaven and earth, just to pause for a second and listen to your brothers and sisters in Christ say those words, because it's an encouragement for us. 2 last thoughts I want to share with you. Sometimes what we do is we use this language, and we say, I don't feel it, or I'm not feeling it right now. And what I want to encourage you when you're in that space is not to rely on your feelings. See, the thing is we know our feelings go up and down based on our sleep habits and our food and everything else that we do. Our emotions and our feelings whipsaw around. And what I want to encourage you is instead to rely on the facts. Say, you know what? We know this through the historical evidence. We know this because Christians for millennia have testified through this. And let your faith follow the facts. And let your feelings rest on that faith and those facts. See, the thing is, we need to keep retelling the story of those facts. 1,400 years before Jesus was there on the cross, God brought the people of Israel out of slavery in Egypt. And they go through the wilderness and they cross into the River Jordan. And as they cross the River Jordan into the Promised Land, God says, here's what I want you to do. I want you to take 12 stones out of the riverbed and put them here as a monument. And so when your children and your children's children ask, what do these stones mean? You can say, these are the things that God has done for us. And you retell the story. Now, when I started here, it seems like 1,400 years ago. I love you all, but a lot has happened since I got here, okay? That was the text I preached on when I first got here. And I talked about how we need to keep retelling those stories, retelling the stories of what God has done for us. And my encouragement for you is that we keep retelling those stories of those things that God has done for us. And we can say, just in the 26 months I've been here, we can tell the stories of how God has been with us. We can tell the stories of how God has brought people to faith, of children that have been baptized, saints that have passed from this kingdom to the next. And we keep telling those stories so that we have faith in Jesus, a faith that we can trust in good days and in bad days, a faith where we know that He has always saved us, and a faith where we know that one day we will see Him face to face. Amen.